Hi everybody, welcome to the Baker Airguns Quick Look. I'm Donnie Reed, and today I'm going to show you how I mount a scope. I'm not telling you this is the only way or the best way, it is simply my way. I've got my FX Impact here, and I'm going to be mounting the new Element Titan with the APR1D Milrad reticle. I really like this reticle. I think the scope's got a lot going on for it right off the bat. It's a 56mm objective, 34mm tube. I should get a nice bright image even in low light conditions, dusk and dawn. I'm going to use these UTG Pro POI scope rings. You can find all this stuff on bakerairguns.com. We do have them all in stock. So first things first, I believe I'll only need a 3mm Allen wrench. Sometimes, depending on your rings, you might need a different size, a 4mm sometimes. I've also got some Q-tips, some alcohol, and some Loctite. Now another thing I'll be using is a bubble level, as well as a plumb bob, a pendulum if you will. And that is at the end of our indoor range, 20 yards away down there. And I use that to level my reticle, at least the starting point. I do suggest shooting to verify your level after you get it roughed in. Okay, now the first thing I do is tear everything apart and degrease it in preparation. Oh my, I've got to make a little edit. As it turns out, these UTG Pro rings don't use Allen screws, they use a torque wrench, which is included in the set of rings. And like I said, the first thing I do is tear them apart, get all the screws out, and this is in preparation for degreasing. You might not think it's a critical step, but if you want Loctite to adhere, you need a completely grease-free surface. Now you'll want to be careful if you have these UTG Pro rings that there are 2 springs inside here. You do not want to lose those. Okay, now that I have everything apart, I'm going to take my Q-tip, get some alcohol on it. And even though it won't exactly fit, I still go around these screw holes just to try to get as much gunk out of there as I can. And I do this to every screw hole on the set of rings. Now I know, some of you are saying right now, Donnie Reed, you're crazy. You're some sort of OCD nut job, right? Look at that Q-tip. That's from just one set. Okay, I've now got all of the screw holes degreased. And the next step is to take a paper towel with some alcohol all over it. And I'm going to actually degrease the tube part of the rings themselves, as well as the Picatinny dovetail type cuts in the bottom. Okay, I now have the set of rings completely degreased. And you might be asking yourself, why? Why would you go through that whole process? Well, I'm not done yet. I'm also going to degrease the rail on my gun. These rings, even though they fit in slots, now to dovetail style rings, this matters in my opinion even more, but it is essentially friction that is holding the rings to your rail. So any lubricant in that process is detrimental. Now, is it a big deal? I don't know, but it makes me feel better to have everything completely degreased before I get to mounting the scope. Next, I'm going to degrease the screws themselves. And the way I do that is by using a paper towel soaked in alcohol. I'll sort of wrap it around the threads of the screw, take my wrench or whatever I'm using, and just twist it, turn it and twist it in the paper towel soaked in alcohol. That's one screw done. And look at that. That's why I do this. And after cleaning and degreasing all of the screws, that's what my paper towel looks like. You might, not want to invest the time to do this. I think it's worth it, especially if you're going to use Loctite. Now, I'm not going to apply Loctite yet, but I am going to start putting things back together. Okay, I've got my two bases put together. And the next thing I want to determine is, where does this scope go on my rail? Where are the rings going to go? Now, I prefer to have the scope pretty far back, so I typically start at the end. So I'll put this ring as far back as it will go, and the other up far enough that I think it should clear the turrets and the bell on the front of the scope. And this is just a starting point. Oh yeah, here it is. The Element Titan. I've been dying to put one of these scopes on my gun. And there will be a full review of this scope coming soon. Okay, there we go. Now, I don't recommend doing what I'm about to do, but I just sit the scope into the bases, pick it up. Now I do put it on maximum magnification. That is where the exit pupil of the scope will be the smallest, and therefore the eye relief will be most critical. So I set it to the highest magnification and also the lowest parallax setting, which it's already at. And then I will carefully lift up the gun and test for eye relief. And the way I do that is I put the rifle into my shoulder and lay my head down with my eyes closed. See, I'm blinded, I can't see, my eyes are closed. So I put my face here where I'm nice and comfy, and then open my eyes. And if the scope is not where I need it to be, I adjust the scope to where I think it's good and start over. So again, I'll put it in my shoulder, close my eyes, lay my head down, open my eyes. Now coincidentally, this is downright perfect. But, I've done this once or twice. And now that I know this is where my bases will go on my rail, I'll either mark them or just count. The front one is 1, 2, 3, 4 slots back, and the rear one's on the rear. So now that I know that's where they go, I'll remove these and then apply Loctite to the screw for the base. You don't need a lot, just a drop is fine. And since we've degreased everything, it's actually going to set properly, which is key. I don't know if you'll be able to see it in the camera, but I literally just use a drop of the Loctite and it works fine. Don't want to overdo it, have it oozing out of the space between the screw and the hole. Now, if you notice, there is a little bit of wiggle room, front and back, even though there's a post going through the slot in the Picatinny rail. There is a bit of confusion about, should you push it all the way forward? Should you push it all the way back? I do one of each. I push the rear all the way back and the front all the way forward. That way it should be stopped no matter which direction the recoil happens to be. You might be wondering about torque specs right now. I do not use a torque wrench to install a scope. I don't know if it's that I haven't spent enough money on an inch-pound torque wrench, but I find them questionably accurate at best. So I use the German torque spec of Gudentight. I make them good and tight. I don't overdo it, I don't underdo it. Okay, now before I put the caps on my rings, I will double check that I have it in the right spot for eye relief again. And we are golden. So now, without Loctiting anything, I will loosely install the caps for the rings. And when I say loosely, I mean loose enough that you can still move the scope. We still need to level this before we Loctite the cap to the base. You know, something I want to make sure of, even though I'm leaving this loosely installed, is that I have an even amount of space on both sides between the cap and the base of the ring. I want everything symmetrical, even, so I'll just get these on until they're snug. Make sure I have about an even amount of space on both sides, and then I'll loosen them back up about 1/4 of a turn each to provide the necessary movement to level the scope. And after this, every turn of these screws will be equal. If I do a 1/4 turn on one, I do a 1/4 turn on the others, and so forth. Okay, now we're ready to level the scope. Okay, now we're going to be leveling the scope. I have it sitting in a rest here, and I have some foam pieces that I can use to tilt it one way or the other. And I have my bubble level. And I'll put the bubble level on the Picatinny rail and then use the pieces of foam to level the scope. This isn't necessary, but it does make it a little easier. So there we go. My bubble level is telling me the gun is level, at least the Picatinny rail is level. And now 20 yards away, I have the plumb bob hanging. Basically a heavy weight on a thin string. And it's free to move, which means that gravity will pull it straight towards the center of the earth, which is what we call plumb, straight up and down. And the objective here is that while the gun is level, I will twist the scope in the rings until the vertical crosshair matches the string at the end of the shooting range. Now this might be a little difficult to see, but I'm going to try to bring the camera down here and show you through the scope what this looks like. I don't have a 34mm attachment for the phone scope or for the side shot scope mount yet, so I can't actually mount it, but we'll do it by hand to see how it goes. Okay, now here you can sort of see that the string down there, the silver thing on the end of it, is my straight up and down line, and my scope isn't even close. So let's do a bit of an adjustment. And when we're done, this is what we should see. The vertical crosshair lined up with the string. Now I do have to make a little more fine adjustment, but that's the goal. After this is completed, I would then tighten all my screws evenly, same amount of turn per screw on the mount, until it's torqued down. At that point, I will remove one screw from each cap individually, Loctite it, and put it back in place until all 8 are done. Now, I'm very excited about this Element Titan scope. It's an ED scope, extreme low dispersion glass. That's unheard of in this price point, especially with a first focal plane lens chain. I think this is going to be on my gun for the foreseeable future. But that is how I mount a scope. I'm not saying it's the best way, the only way, it is simply my way. And though it takes longer than, you know, just slapping the rings on, putting the scope in it and sighting it in, I feel like it's a better mount because of the, you know, the Loctite, the lack of lubricant on the rail, between the rail and the base of the rings. You do what you want, but that's how I do it. I thank you all for watching, and you guys stay tuned, stay safe, and happy shooting.
Hi, I'm Dennis Baker with Baker Airguns. Thanks for stopping by. Click the link below.